Welcome to ECO 103, Study Session 2, Macroeconomic Policies in Nigeria. Introduction. Different countries have a number of policies that are often made to address one economic problem or the other. Such economic policies are called macroeconomic policies. In this study session, you will explore the macroeconomic policies in Nigeria. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to state the objectives of macroeconomics, analyze the various macroeconomic policies adopted in Nigeria over the years. Objectives or goals of macroeconomics. The national objective pursued by any country are subject to change depending on the economic fortunes of the country. In general, such objectives include 1. Maintenance of relative stability in domestic prices. 2. Attainment of a high rate of or full employment. 3. Achievement of a high, rapid, and sustainable economic growth. 4. Maintenance of balance of payment equilibrium. And 5. Exchange rate stability. Prevalent macroeconomic policies in Nigeria. To achieve the identified macroeconomic objectives in Nigeria, the following macroeconomic policies are often employed. Number 1, monetary policy. Number 2, fiscal policy. Number 3, exchange rate policy. And number 4, trade policy. These are discussed briefly in turns. Monetary policy. Monetary policy, according to IAO 1993, involves measures designed to regulate and control the volume, cost, availability, and direction of money and credit in an economy to achieve some specified macroeconomic policy objectives. Ajayi and Ojo 2006 maintain that monetary policy refers to the combinations of measures designed to regulate the value, supply, and cost of money in an economy in consonance with the level of economic activities. In the words of Olalokun, 1987, monetary policy consists of actions by the government which are aimed at the achievement of a certain set of economic objectives. Gingan, 1997, believes that monetary policy is nothing but the policy of the monetary authority of a country with regard to monetary matters, who is vested with the responsibility of conducting monetary policy in Nigeria. In Nigeria, the responsibility of conducting monetary policy squarely lies with the Central Bank of Nigeria, as outlined in the Central Bank Act of 1958 and its subsequent amendment, the CBN Decree number 24 of 1991, and the Banks and Other Financial Institution Decree number 25 of 1991. The CBN is enjoined by these laws to promote monetary stability and a sound financial system in Nigeria under the overall guidance of the federal government of Nigeria. Objectives of monetary policy. Consistent with the legal mandate of the CBN, the objectives of monetary policy since its inception include 1. Achievement of domestic price and exchange rate stability. 2. Maintenance of a healthy balance of payment position. 3. Development of a sound financial system. 4. Promotion of rapid and sustainable rate of economic growth and development. For Ajayi and Ojo 2006, it is usual these days to state that the major objective of monetary policy is the maintenance of price stability. This is because, according to them, inflation is known to be inhibitive of economic growth. Instruments of monetary policy. Broadly speaking, instruments of monetary policy can be classified into direct monetary control instruments and indirect monetary control instruments. The direct monetary control instruments include interest rate control, credit ceiling control, direct lending, moral suasion, etc. On the other hand, the indirect instruments, which are also referred to as the traditional instrument of monetary policy, are open market operation, reserve requirement, discount rate policy. Open market operation. Open market operation (OMO) is a sale or purchase of government securities in the open market, often at the initiative of the central bank. It was introduced at the end of June 1993. If the central bank buys securities, their price rises, interest rate falls, and monetary supply increases. If the central bank sells securities, their prices fall, interest rate and money supply decreases. Ajayi and Ojo 2006 state that the success of open market operation depends on several factors, namely the existence of broad and active market for government securities, so that the ability of the central bank to engage in OMO on a large scale does not lead to violent fluctuation in the price of the securities. 2. The maintenance of a fixed ratio between deposit liabilities and cash reserves by the commercial banks. B. Reserve requirement. This is the minimum percentage of the total assets which banks and other financial institutions are required to hold in money balances or in some form of highly liquid assets. If the central bank target is to reduce the amount of money in circulation, it increases the reserve requirement ratio of the commercial banks. On the other hand, a decrease in the ratio means that the central banking authority desires to increase loan and investment and possibly hold excess reserves. C. Discount rate policies. This is a tool of monetary policy designed to influence the cost at which commercial banks can borrow from the central bank. If the discount rate is increased, the central bank credit to commercial banks reduces. When the central bank wants to expand the money supply, it decreases the discount rate. Constraint to monetary policy management in Nigeria, the transmission mechanism. According to NANA 2001, despite the efforts in the past years to evolve a monetary policy framework that would enhance the achievement of macroeconomic and price stability in Nigeria, there have been constraints militating against the attainment of such objectives. These constraints include: number one, fiscal dominance. Fiscal expansion and the concomitant large deficit averaging about 3% of GDP have militated against the efficacy of monetary policy in Nigeria. In 1999, the level of fiscal deficit was 8.4% of GDP. Liquidity overhang. There are various sources of liquidity in the Nigerian economy. Predominant in this regard is the growth of credit to the government. Others include oligopolistic banking system. The oligopolistic structure of the Nigerian banking system is another constraint on the efficient transmission of the monetary policy instruments. Very few large banks control a greater proportion of the liquidity in the banking system. 4. Data. Poor data is a major constraint in the formulation of monetary policy in Nigeria. 5. Inefficient payment system. Nigeria is cash-based economy. Almost all payments are made in cash, and as such, the large volume of currency in circulation or high-powered money renders monetary control difficult, if not impossible. Fiscal policy. The term fiscal policy, as Bamidele and Englama 1998 puts it, refers to government revenue generation through a variety of taxes, royalty, investment income, etc. The expenditure profile, transfer, distribution, and all other related policies of the public sector activities. Objective of fiscal policy in Nigeria. Ever since our independence, Nigeria has made a number of developmental plans. Each of these plans has its fiscal policy objectives. One can therefore summarize Nigeria's fiscal policy objectives for the period of 1970 to 1993 as follows. 1. Generation of significant additional revenue. 2. Reduction in tax burden on individuals and corporate bodies. 3. Promotion of self-reliant development. 4. Substantial and progressive reduction and elimination of government budget deficit. 5. Maintenance of economic equilibrium with regard to employment, output, balance of payment, and the general price level. 6. Enhancing productivity in agriculture and boosting capacity utilization in the manufacturing sector. 7. Promotion of transparency and accountability in the management of public finance. 8. Reduction of the heavy burden of both external and internal debt. 9. Guaranteeing effective protection of domestic industries. 10. Integrating the informal sector of the economy into the mainstream. 11. Correction of the distorted pattern of both domestic consumption and production. Fiscal policy instruments. The two main fiscal policy instruments adopted in Nigeria include 1. Changes in the rate of taxation, which include taxes on personal income, petroleum profit, royalties, export and excise duties, import duties, and so on. 2. Government expenditure, that is recurrent and capital. It should be noted that taxation is the most effective of the two instruments. How fiscal instruments work. 1. Expansionary fiscal policy. Under this policy, the CBN aims at expanding the amount of money in the economy. To do this, the CBN initiates measures that would increase expenditure and reduce taxation. 2. Contractionary fiscal policy. This is a policy that targets at reducing the amount of money in the economy. Here, what the CBN does is to ensure that the government expenditure is reduced while at the same time increasing taxes. Exchange rate policy. Exchange rate is simply the price of one currency in terms of another. According to Osigwe 2005, exchange rate policies are those policies geared towards the determination of the prices of the domestic currency in terms of other currencies. Nigeria's exchange rate policy can be examined in two different time periods, namely the pre-SAP period and the post-SAP period. Pre-SAP exchange rate policy. In a nutshell, the exchange rate policy of Nigeria prior to the introduction of SAP could be better described as a passive one. To be precise, the pre-SAP era dates back to 1959, when the value of the Nigerian pound was fixed at par with the British pound sterling. In 1967, the Nigerian pound appreciated in value following the devaluation of the British pound sterling. Thus, the exchange rate of one Nigerian pound became 1.7 British pound sterling. At this time, the exchange rate was fixed. In 1974, the adjustable pegged system of exchange rate determination was adopted. This system lasted from 1974 to 1977, but was modified with the pegging of the value of the naira to a system of import. The exchange rate policy in the pre-SAP era exhibited two main characteristics, namely, 1. Ensuring that the balance of payment remains at equilibrium in the short run, influencing relative price structures in domestic currency terms between the tradable, non-tradable, and overall domestic prices. 2. It targeted a high exchange value instead of on the long run balance of payment viability. Exchange rate policy under SAP. Structural Adjustment Program was introduced in 1986. The exchange rate policy within this period was more dynamic than it hitherto was. Exchange rate became determined by the forces of demand and supply. Here came the regime of unfettered floating exchange rate. The second tier foreign exchange market (SFEM) was introduced in September 1986, the United Official Market in 1987, the Autonomous Foreign Exchange Market in 1995, the Interbank Foreign Exchange Market in 1999, and the Dutch auction system in 2002. Bureau de change were licensed in 1989 to accord access to small users of foreign exchange and enlarge the officially organized foreign exchange market. All in all, we can conclude that Nigeria's exchange rate policy under SAP was more pragmatic. Trade policy. Trade policy refers to the way in which an economy's goods and services are valued vis-a-vis its import and the ease with which commodities flow in and out of the economy. Indeed, it is a vital instrument for directing the external sector towards the achievement of external balance and growth in the economy. However, for this to take place, it needs to be supported by an appropriate exchange rate adjustment capable of stimulating the external trade subsector. Ogunkola 2009 posits that trade policy in general entails actions and measures of a government that are directed at manipulating the composition and direction of trade to the benefit of a country. He went further to argue that the goal of trade policy is to influence the structure, volumes, and proportion of production and consumption of tradable. Nigeria's trade policy has been pursued for the attainment of macroeconomic stability through the restricted and liberalized trade regimes. On a general note, policy instruments in this direction involved fiscal devices, including tariffs, export taxes, and subsidies, and is usually complemented with other instruments such as quantitative restriction and outright ban of some products. However, the major outcome of the trade reform that characterized the introduction of the Structural Adjustment Program was a correction of the distortion in relative prices that had before now discouraged agricultural output and fostered a highly import-dependent industrial development. The gross value of the trade in Nigeria has improved nominally. For instance, output rose from 7,064 million in 1985 to 449.7 billion in 1996. Trade liberalization, which started after the introduction of SAP, successfully eliminated price control, boarding, and queues for essential commodities, but the problem of dumping still persists. This is the end of study session 2. Thanks for listening.